So, I haven't gotten around to making a video on this yet. I've had it in the back of my head. And I've jumped on a sorceress that can clear Duriel. It's not the greatest clear in the world, but she can clear Duriel. I specifically chose this because it has one of my only copies of Tybalt's Will on. And it has something that I want to mention. So, if you guys did not know, the next major patch with the introduction of Season 4 is going to have an itemization change. Now, explaining a little bit of what I mean by an itemization change, just to grab a couple of items out of my stash and explain. Basically, items in Diablo kind of work like this. Yellows are the most common and plentiful source of loot in the game, and that is what you're going to be grabbing the most of because of the way the stats on yellows work. This, to me, is a good ring because I can take off that fortified generation, roll on maximum life, and that's a good ring for a barbarian. See? Example. Because I can go to the occultist and I can roll, I can enchant one of these categories and keep re-rolling it, this item is more valuable to me. Now, legendaries, in theory, are the exact same thing that a regular yellow is. The only difference is that they have this aspect on it. Now, I have this ring saved because it's a good aspect on it. I like this aspect. It's an aspect I will use. The problem is, the stats on the ring are absolutely abysmal. And because if I have to choose between these two rings, I would just pull the aspect off of here and put it onto here. This item is the superior item over the legendary. And we'll cover uniques in a minute. Right now, uniques are really only being are the main source of gear that you're farming, just because of the fact that most of their effects are so game-breakingly good. And the majority of your stash tab is going to be full of legendaries that you're trying to keep, or they're going to be full of uniques that you're farming for. So, most players are going to be going out of their way to farm uniques or to grab extra copies of the legendaries that they need. The itemization change that comes into the next patch is going to be changing that. And one thing too is, like, if I were to go over and buy, say, this ring right here is a ass ring, because the majority of these stats don't give me any effect. But if I wanted to, I could buy that ring, take it over, and just keep re-rolling and re-rolling and re-rolling until it has the stats I want. That's the time investment, that's the money investment you don't want to do. So what they're doing in the next patch is they're changing how items work. So now this yellow item is only going to have 2 lines of text on it. 2. It's either going to have, say, the overpower and the close damage, but no fortify and no resource. Just as an example. This legendary item is now only going to get 3 rolls on it. And this unique stays exactly the same. Now, why is there a problem with this? This devalues yellows. That's fine. Yellows should be devalued. There's no reason why I'm more excited about a yellow dropping than I am about a legendary dropping. And because all of the aspects that are in the game are going to be in the Codex of Power. Instead of the Codex of Power now looking something like this, it's going to have all 230 some odd aspects that are in the game. What this means is that I no longer have to sit here and hoard high roll type copies of the aspects I'm already planning on using. I just have the Codex for that. So now you have to make legendaries feel valuable. And, oh shit, and you have the problem that they're going to be making it much, much easier for the average player to upgrade their gear, because you're no longer going to have this aspect tab that is necessary to be full or almost full the entire time. So, they're replacing these aspects with tempering manuals. And tempering manuals are going to give you the ability to customize individual pieces of gear a lot more than you could otherwise do beforehand. So, example, this one right here is core mastery skills get crit chance above a certain amount of mana. That is going to be a legendary aspect. So I can still put that on a piece of gear if I want to. But now, instead of my ring having crit, vulnerable, close, and life regen, let's say it has crit, vulnerable, and damage to close, I can add 2 more aspects onto that. Or affixes, I should say. So let's say I decide I want to add on, you know, overpower damage and resource generation, right? This ring is going to be insane because of some of the niche things that you can do. They're going to have most of the damage on Tuesday style categories, like, you know, critical strike damage with lightning skills, are going to be chucked into those affix pools. So this is now not going to be as valuable in its base form. It's going to be valuable because I can temper it how I want. Now, why am I mentioning all of this? The current gameplay loop in the game is based around uniques. The current gameplay loop in the game is based around the player going out and acquiring uniques. And as you can see from what I have right here, I have a decent amount of uniques. These are also including uniques that, not including the uniques, I should say, that I have salvaged. Now, why am I talking about uniques today? Uniques, realistically, fall into 4 categories. And I want to talk about those 4 categories. So what I'm doing is I'm going to pull out the categories of what I mean. Alright. Now, there's 4 categories of uniques that are in the game, in my opinion. And that's what we're going to talk about. So you see I have 5 uniques here, and I'll explain that in a minute. Now, uniques are not receiving any substantial change in terms of tempering or the affixes that they have. And this is an issue, because the majority of uniques in the game roll retarded, stupid, dumb, asinine, whatever insult and derogatory term you want to use, stacked on them. Good example of this. Mad Wolf's Glee. Mad Wolf's Glee is run on Storm Druids because of Tempest Roar. Mad Wolf's Glee on it has damage reduction from poisoned enemies. You cannot get value out of this as a Storm Druid if you don't have some type of poison in your build. That means running Wolves, that means running Poison Creeper, that means running Rabies, that means running Claw with the Poison affix. Some type of modifier that gives you poison damage, otherwise that entire line of text is wasted. Excuse me. The movement speed on it is also somewhat wasted. Why? Because you don't really get value out of that movement speed, realistically speaking, when your whole plan is to hold down the button and just nuke the screen with lightning. You only get benefit from the maximum life, which most pieces of gear want maximum life, total armor, and some type of a resistance. And you have a good chunk of damage, which is nice to have, I guess. The main reason you run it is it keeps you in werewolf form, and it gives you +3 ranks to all skills. But you see, with the tempering system, if I could temper something, that wouldn't be a problem, because I could then put on an aspect to replace one of the shitty rolls that I have. So let's talk about the classes now of uniques. Obviously, at the top, you have an uber unique. I've actually been waiting for an uber unique to drop in order to make this video, to make my point. This is an uber unique, by the way. This is an uber unique. This has a 2% drop rated Dural and a 0.000001 chance of dropping anywhere else. Without farming Duriel, you will never see this item in the game. This is arguably one of the worst Uber uniques in the game. Of all the Uber uniques that are in the game, I believe there's either 6 or 7. Is it 6 or 7? 7 right now. Of all 7 Uber uniques in the game, this is probably the worst. It's a generic helm. It has a good, relatively good stats. It has all stat, because it's generic, that's fine. It has attack speed, which again is fine. It's one of the only items in the game that has lifesteal on it, at least right now. And it has beefy Giga Chad poison resistance. Slap this bad boy on, and you will never have to worry about your poison resistance again. It has an okay effect as well. It's a lucky hit, 20% Poison Nova. Problem. If you want to build this into a poison build, you have two builds that can use it. Poison Rogue and Poison Druid. And if you're not running either of those two builds, you're only running this for its stats. And its stats aren't very good. Now, most Uber Uniques, I can't show you any others, I don't have any others, are some of the most sought at and fought over items in the game. So just pretend this is something like a Melted Heart of Sealig, a Ring of Starless Skies, a Grandfather, or a Shaco. You get my point. Pretend this is a Shaco. If a Shaco were to drop, I'm going to shove this on one of my builds. I have 12 characters. I have a notebook for keeping track of all my freaking characters and like what aspects and what stuff I'm looking for. Here's the thing. This is not on any of those builds. It's not going to be on any of those builds. If this was a Shaco, it would be on one of those builds, because the Shaco is just so much more powerful. Now, Uber Uniques are supposed to be rare, they're supposed to be powerful, they're supposed to have insane drop rates. So I have no problem with discluding Uber Uniques out of the argument. That's why we pulled out the extra character. So now you have Tybalt's Will. Tybalt's Will is going to be our Uber Unique substitute in terms of value. This is an item that's getting nerfed in the big patch, by the way. It's going to go down from 20% to 40%, down to 10% to 20%. So it's basically getting cut in half, and it's still going to be played. You want to know why? It's just too good of an item. This solves so many issues. This gives you 50 of your primary resource whenever you become unstoppable with no cooldown. Meaning, if you are running Metamorphosis boots, like I am, congratulations. You now have turn your quad dodge boots into a resource generator. Anytime you become unstoppable, you get access to this. Now, this benefits some classes more than others. Sorceress benefits more from this than, say, a Necromancer would. But this is a must-have item. Why? It gives you a chunk of damage for a decent amount of time, and it gives you resource on your pants slot. In addition to that, the stats on it are also particularly good. 20% damage reduction from close enemies is very good. The plus to maximum resource is, again, good for the build. It's not my ideal stat. I would prefer that to be armor or something. It has potion capacity, and it has maximum damage. Old Tybalt's Will had maximum life on it, which I appreciate that more. But you have to understand, I'm giving up armor and life in exchange for this. The damage is okay. The maximum resource is okay. The potion capacity is okay. The damage reduction is okay. It has decent enough stats on it, but you're going to run it pretty much regardless for its aspect. This is a must-have, must-run item that you're going to slot into builds. When I'm designing up builds and saying, okay, how do I want to make this character an endgame character? I say, okay, well, can I work in crowd control immunity on my character enough where I can justify running Tybalt's Will? Do I need other defensive aspects enough? If I was playing another build, for example, let's say I'm playing an Earth Werebear Druid, so I have to run Vasilis on my head, and I have to run Insatiable on my chest, I cannot afford to then lose my pants and my boots to another unique that I can't temper, I can't customize, and the boots that I can. Because look at a build like that. I mean, Vasilis is going to give me 1 resistance and maximum life. Insatiable is going to give me no resistances, no maximum life. And then you would have Tybalt's, which again, no resistances, no maximum life, no armor. So, your 3 dedicated defensive slots, you're not going to be getting enough of a buff. So builds do have to plan a little bit more carefully. Then as another example, we have class or character specific uniques. What I mean by this is something like a Starfall Cornet. This is a key component in a Fire Sorceress build. If you want to play Fireball, if you want to play Meteor, any type of fire build, if you want to do Talrashas and you only have 1 slot to do fire, you could chuck Meteor on if you have a Starfall Cornet. You see how you can make certain builds work and certain builds viable with certain pieces of gear. This is what the majority of the uniques in the game are. But even these are not immune. Like I said before, Starfall Cornet is a fantastic item. It has maximum life, which is good defensively, plus ranks to the skill it's buffing, cooldown reduction, which helps the piece of gear, and lucky hit chance, which is okay, I guess. It works if you're trying to double and triple stack meteors. So, this is a good piece of gear. Why am I highlighting this as being a quote-unquote mid piece of gear? It's a new piece of gear. That's why. If you look at older class-specific and character-specific type stuff, such as Flesh Renderer. Flesh Renderer right here is a unique mace for druids. So it's a one-hander that you're playing with a totem. This makes it so that your Debilitating Roar and Blood Howl, in the next patch, it'll get buffed to where all your defensive skills. So, for the sake of clarity, let's do that. All your defensive skills will deal bonus damage to nearby poisoned enemies. There's two problems with this. One, they already have to be poisoned. And two, look at the stats on it. Now, damage while shapeshifted is good, because you're going to be werewolf. And ranks of all defensive skills is good, because it buffs defensive skills. And damage to poisoned enemies is good, because you're going to be poisoning enemies. But the core skill damage and the overpower sees no value, because your damage is going to come from poison damage. You want to run as many defensive skills as possible. You're going to probably run Claw as a basic skill, as some type of a generator. You might run Rabies, you might run Poison Creeper. Maybe you're going full cooldown, but you're at least running Rabies and Poison Creeper. So at a bare minimum, I'm running Rabies, Poison Creeper, Debilitating Roar, and Blood Howl. Did I mention a core skill there? I did not. And ultimately, it's the type of weapon that makes you drop out of a build. Similarly, this is Gora's Devastating Grips. This is for a Whirlwind Barbarian. So only Whirlwind Barbarians can take advantage of it. It has plus the damage, which is good. It has plus crit against close, which is good. It has lucky hit chance, which is meh. It has ranks of Whirlwind, which is good if you're a Whirlwind Barbarian. Why wouldn't you be running this? But then look at its effect. Whirlwind explodes every 2 seconds, and after it ends, dealing X amount of the base damage as fire damage. That's not that noteworthy. There's no aspect where Whirlwinds, it could have a much better effect on it that would make it a must-run in a Whirlwind build. Whirlwind builds, honestly, can do without this item, especially if your other unique slots are better. If you're two-handed slashing as a grandfather, and let's say you're running something like a Zerrath on a one-hander, maybe you're going for a frozen Whirlwind build, so you're running a Zerrath in place of it, where your core skills have a chance to freeze enemies. Okay, so you run a Zerweld there. Frostburn is better for your gloves as a niche pick. Penitent Greaves for your boots. I wouldn't be running Goras in that build, because it's just not a strong enough aspect. That's just an example. Then you have the generic filler uniques that already aren't seeing that much play. They'll see some niche play. They'll see some play until you can get something better. Good example is Pain Gouger Gauntlets. I like this unique. I think this unique is a fantastic unique. There's a problem with it, though. It just doesn't do enough. Your glove slot is a very valuable slot to have, because of the fact that, you know, it's one of the few slots where you can roll plus rank to a weapon right now. It gives all stats, which is nice. It gives attack speed, which is good. It gives crit damage, or crit chance, which is okay. And it gives basic skill damage, which is good because of how it works. But look at how it works. So you damage enemies with non-basic skills, then you hit them with a basic skill. That damage is increased and echoed onto all the enemies. Now, basic attack builds aren't very common right now, mostly because they don't give us enough character slots. There's about one build that can make it work, which is Stormclaw. Stormclaw is playing around, where is it? Is playing around Great Staff of the Crown. Here's the problem, though. Because you're losing your two-handed weapon slot to a unique, imagine losing your gloves to a unique. Pain Gougers is very hard to justify, even if it is good. So you have this problem, in a sense, where you're trying to justify a build without actually getting the build to be successful. If you can make Pain Gougers work, you'll run it. But most of the time, it's too much effort. Now, what am I highlighting here? This unique is a good unique if you build into it. You're not going to build into it when the new patch comes out because of the fact it's a unique. Because I can't temper my own stats on there. Because I can't control what's going on there as much. Basically, when this item drops, it drops. I am stuck with it in this form. I don't get a lot of value out of this item compared to other items I could be getting value out of. Now, that leads me to the last category of uniques. The asinine category of uniques that already aren't seeing play. This is essentially a maximum mother's embrace. You will never see this on a character that knows what they're doing. If you're a Diablo player and you know what you're doing, you do not see this being played. Because its effect isn't strong enough. It refunds half of your resource cost if a core skill hits 4 or more enemies. Here's the problem with that. That doesn't help you in boss fights. That doesn't help you in PvP fights. That only helps you in clearing monster density and wave density. If I'm farming a boss for materials to then go farm another boss for uniques, I get no value out of this item. I get no value out of this item in the one situation where I need it, where I need to spam my damaging skill as much as possible because a single target is smacking me. This item already sees no play. Now, this is kind of a niche application because this item, if it does see play, it sees plays because of its stats. It has critical strike damage, it has all stat, it has maximum life. Those are good things to have on a ring. Problem is, I can get a little bit better results off of my other rings. This ring right here is maximum life, critical strike with the type of damage I'm using, which is more powerful, and resource generation. That set of 3 is better than this set of 3. It's just not going to see value. And there are a number of uniques in the game that already aren't seeing value for one reason or another. You know, you have Godslayer Crown, which has too many conditions on it to realistically see value, even if it does have good stats on it. You're just not proccing it that often, and it doesn't have enough defensively on there to make it viable. If you look at something like, I don't know, a Howl from Below, you're taking that valuable glove slot away for Corpse Explosion, which most players build. Corpse Explosion's an afterthought. You're definitely not going to run a unique with 2 lucky hit chance effects on it that can be detrimental to you. You know, another example, something like, where is it? Where's Raiment? Raiment of the Infinite's another great example to this. This is an item that in theory works well. When you teleport, it pulls enemies into you, but the trade-off is you increase the cooldown on teleport. I'm fine with that. Great item. Why am I not running this? It has intelligence, it has damage to close, damage to stun, it has ranks of Glass Cannon. I don't run Glass Cannon. I don't want to run Glass Cannon. Glass Cannon is an absolutely terrible, terrible passive effect to run. And also, look what it's missing. I'm losing a defensive slot. I'm losing maximum life. I'm losing total armor. I'm losing a resistance. I'm losing damage reduction. It's a strictly offensive unique, taking up a defensive slot. Now, for something like a Starfall Cornet, that works. Why? Starfall Cornet has maximum life on it. It is giving me a defensive skill. It's giving me something to keep me alive in addition to all of its other offensive stats. A similar thing to look at is Esu's Heirloom. Esu's Heirloom is a decently good unique boot because it has mana cost reduction and critical strike damage, which are always good to have, and you don't normally get that critical strike damage on boots. It also gives you a bunch of movement speed, which helps its bonus. Critical strike chances increase by a percentage of your movement speed. Here's the problem with that, though. It has nothing defensively on there to help me. The movement speed for 4 seconds after killing an elite could be replaced with lightning resistance, fire resistance, ice resistance. A low resist all roll would be pretty good. This would see more play. You know? And there's other examples, too, of aspects where you're just not running them. Razorplate's a prime example of this. Razorplate will see no play if you are not a dedicated AFK Thorns build because of the fact, what does it give you? Thorns. Nothing else. You could put some affixes on there, some shitty roll affixes, and it would still see no play. As of now, it's not going to see any play, just because it doesn't give you anything. And I think that's kind of the sad part that I have with the game right now, is that they're devaluing the uniques that already aren't seeing play to never being seen. And even the uniques that are seeing play are just going to get pushed further and further down the ladder and not seeing any more play. And honestly, that just sucks for